We're so grateful to have you. It's such an honor, and especially for you to be sharing your knowledge with the world in such a vibrant way and in such a relatable, tangible, practical way. We really appreciate it. So I know people really enjoyed the live stream we did last night. We've gotten a lot of feedback that people were taking notes and bringing it back to their communities, their family, their church. So I'm excited to have another riveting discussion like that tonight.
When you help people and you actually see the joy and you see the comments and you see people going, wow, I never thought about that issue that way. It is so fulfilling and it makes this actually pleasurable. I'm sure along the journey we're going to meet people and detractors, but I'm not here to make people happy. I'm here to educate and to explain what is going on. Some people are not going to like the message, but others are going to enjoy the fact that they're finally getting a perspective perhaps they haven't heard in a long time or they've never heard. And from my perspective, I only started doing this, Kim, because it got very personal for me. And we can go into some of that later, but when you're affected by technology and you start to realize how hard it is to do anything in technology, and as it gets harder, I realize that if it's hard for me, and I've been doing technology my whole career, and I've been inventing these cool things, but everything now is around technology. And then I'm thinking of the poor individual, the consumer, the user, who I prefer to call a human being, that human. I mean, how are they supposed to be technologists? How are they supposed to actually have any of the information I have? And if it's difficult for me, it must be very difficult for them.
Yeah, 100%. If it's difficult for you, it's difficult for the average American. But then how much more difficult or even impossible is it for children? And again, it's a huge part of our message, how we can protect them and prevent them from seeing the things that we just know too much. And we know that children cannot unsee some of those things. So for anyone just joining, for those who don't know, Veterans for Child Rescue is a nonprofit. We're dedicated to exposing and eradicating child trafficking in the United States. We do a lot of counter trafficking ops in conjunction with law enforcement, where there's a lot of different types of operational templates. I've been on a few of the counter trafficking ops in the last couple months. And let me just summarize by saying, as an adult, when I'm posing as a child, in order to identify predators and allow them to incriminate themselves, I need parents to know what their children are facing on these apps and websites that we use that are not even dark web apps. These are not places the kids have to disobey you and go look for trouble. These are not even dating apps. These are apps that any kid can download from the App Store and use to network with friends, which predators are using or infiltrating or exploiting in order to directly access children. So there's so much I could get into here, but I'm just going to summarize by saying the predation is so aggressive. It's so immediate. Just by existing as a child on the internet, I am inundated by this predation, by the most unimaginably, terribly advanced, violent things you can't even imagine, and that would not be appropriate for adults. This is what's being said to a child, a 12 to 14-year-old baby face looking child. So first of all, in general, these tech platforms are not doing their job of protecting children. And I want to unpack that with Mark. But in addition to, okay, yes, they're responsible, they should be accountable. Let's talk about how we can solve that. In the meantime, parents need to be aware of the risks and they need to be informed about the solutions, what they can do to prevent their child from experiencing this and to deal with and communicate with their child in the likely event that they have already experienced something like this. So Mark, I know you have a really impassioned message about this. And you guys, my friend Mark Stross here just wrote a book. It's called Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity. I was fortunate enough to get one of the advanced copies, and his book is being released in January. So he has a lot of information about the book. I highly encourage you guys to get it. It's on his website. It's markstross.com. So pre-order the book as soon as it's available because it's tons of really practical tips and information. So we're going to cover as much as we can tonight. And of course, there's going to be a lot more things that you can unravel if you check out his website. But Mark, What's your general message that you need parents to know when it comes to protecting children on the internet?
I'm going to be very succinct. You have to start a dialogue with your children. You have to start a dialogue with yourself, and we have to start dealing with addiction directly. If any of us don't admit that we're addicted to the beautiful technologies and all of the razzle-dazzle that we've created with all of these social apps and all of the cool things that we can do. And by the way, I want to make it very clear. And Kim, you know I have to be very clear on this. I love technology, everyone. I am actually a complete lover of tech. That is why I've created these incredibly cool places that a lot of you have gone to. I have a team of incredible people at ANC, my day job, in which we create these incredible displays, and my works at the World Trade Center with my team, and the team's works all over the country. And what's so cool is that by doing this work, I became an expert in security, not because I wanted to be, but because it was mandatory. You can't do the work any longer without doing the security. So when you think about it, you today have to be a security expert first and then a visual expert second. And that's tough. That meant I had to go back and really retool and retrain myself. So again, going back to the parents and you guys, I'm not here because I want to get famous specifically. No, what I want to do instead is educate. I could have stopped where my career is going right now and just stayed on my career path. I would have been very safe. What I'm doing now is really coming out as an educator and telling people, we have a problem. You know, it's not a problem that any of us are really bad. And specifically me being on one of the platforms I most worry about, TikTok, which I want to make very clear. When TikTok is good, it's great. When TikTok does cool things and creates incredible cultural phenomena, it's amazing. The technology, the engine behind TikTok is absolutely incredible. And the amount of AI and the amount of tools and the amount of programming and care that went into creating this platform, I do not want to underrate it. It's absolutely the best in class of what it does. However, TikTok, just like Instagram, just like Meta, just like everyone, has one issue. They all need to retain our eyeballs and keep those eyeballs fixed on those screens. So when you think of it in terms of what is the problem, it's addiction. And the addiction is us. We are the addicted. The plague, if you want to call it a plague, is the fact that we now all probably share, most of us, symptoms of the same disease. So now how are we going to join together in a real dialogue and start to help each other? That is actually my challenge. I'd like to see everyone hold hands and let's change the culture, not by politics. I'm not into that. I'm into changing the dialogue so that we can help our children. We can take predators off the street and we can protect your homes and my home, your home. Yeah, that's what I'd like to do.
Yeah, I love the approach. It's very solutions oriented and it's very balanced. And I use that word with you a lot because balance is important. Balance is where we thrive and where we find solutions. But balance is also needed in these discussions that aren't necessarily a yes or no answer. Meaning, there are people that are saying all technology is bad, or they're saying things like, don't allow your children access to the internet. Now, I'm not a parent. I'm not saying I disagree, but I'm also saying that might not be realistic for the average parent, specifically single parents who need to sometimes entertain their kid. There's also a lot of positive things about technology that I would like to see children take advantage of. However, I've also done counter-trafficking ops and posed as a child on the internet, and I have been flooded with the most disgusting predatory things that no child should ever be privy to. So I think balance is necessary because the answer lies somewhere in the middle, and the answer does lie within awareness and knowledge or communication or solutions or dialogue. All these things I've heard you talk about and discuss with various communities, even opposing views. It's so important for us to take this message seriously without overreacting, without driving kids to the point of hiding things from us instead of communicating and navigating through it. So I love your approach. Can you talk about your idea of getting into your child's world and why that's important?
Yeah, I mean, when I grew up, I'm 60 years old this year. And when I think back, I grew up in around the 70s and the 80s. It's a very interesting time because parents didn't like the ramifications of rock and roll. They thought rock and roll was going to destroy civilization. And just like we feel that TikTok would destroy civilization, there is some humor in there because I want to make it very clear that looking at history, I'm not foolish enough to tell you all that this technology is inherently evil. That's not the problem. What the problem is that all of us have need an accountability partner, and we've lost it. Because the problem is, in our own families, we have no one we can be accountable to because everyone is dealing with their mutual addicted selves and their apps and what they like to do, and no one's sharing. There's very little sharing going on. And we need to go into this other, we have not gone into yet, funnels. But when we go into funnels, this will make more sense. But everyone is looking at their own bias. They're looking at their own reality because the algorithms, the social media that you're looking at right now on TikTok, tries to make you happy. Because the more it makes you happy, the more you stay on. Which actually means, doesn't it, at the end of the day, you're looking at everything that makes you happy, but you're not seeing the news. You're not seeing a reality. You're seeing specifically your reality. And then you all have to think about it. Where is our reality? Where is the collective reality? It doesn't exist anymore. It literally is gone. So it's humorous, kind of, because we always say, well, we're going to help each other. But we start off with the premise that we're not going to really talk about the very problem, which is us.
Yeah, that's so true. I like how you talk about not only bridging that gap in understanding and in dialogue and the need for that, but also getting into what your kids are doing, not in a way that's threatening them or taking it away, but in a way of understanding. I think that's so important for people.
Heck yes. I mean, if you really want to be an amazing parent and actually learn on the journey of being an amazing parent, and I don't think there's anyone right now who wouldn't want to do this if they really thought about it in hopefully the new way that I inspire you to think about this. If you want someone not to do something, it's very helpful to actually be informed about the topic and the subject that you're trying to change their mind about. You need to be informed before you start telling someone, don't use this. And you can't just use a statistic. It's bad for you to use the phone, so don't use the phone. That doesn't work. But what if you actually started to live inside the apps and inside the world of your children? Not in an uncool way, actually in a way that you go to your children and say, hey, listen, will you introduce me to your world? I really don't understand it. And I really would like you to explain what's cool in your world. What makes you happy? It won't be what makes me happy or maybe you happy, but your child might be extremely happy with the content they're looking at. And when you finally understand what is their happy index, what actually makes them happy, I believe you can then start having an honest discussion Should what is making them happy be fringe, on the edge, not in your value system? But you don't have to be, in my opinion, mad about it. You don't have to come in ferociously. Instead, we start a really cool thing called dialogue. And the dialogue can go like, hey, I don't quite understand what you're looking at, but I want to understand more. So could you explain, do those activities make you happy? Are you squeamish at all? Is there anything here that maybe you're concerned about? If maybe what they're looking at is too violent, or there's a lot of rhetoric, a lot of screaming, or maybe it's very political, maybe it's very sexual. So the thing is, you won't know unless you give it a chance and really go into your kid's world. And I want to make it clear, I don't mean in a phony way, I mean in a genuine way. And it's going to take effort. And a lot of parents actually don't have the time because they want to go back to their own devices to play. And I'm sorry, it's going to take a lot of time. But if you want to help the world, if you really want to be able to help us with explaining to TikTok what's wrong, if you really want to change anything today, we all need to become a lot more informed. So therefore, I'm on TikTok right now, and I am learning more about TikTok. So that way, if I do want to offer a criticism, I'm equally going to be able to talk about TikTok in a fair and hopefully unbiased way.
Yeah, that's so important. It's important to be informed, and also I like the angle of first educating yourself on what the issue is so that you can offer helpful information or dialogue or safeguards or concerns. I think a lot of kids will naturally rebel when their parent says don't do something, and I know you talk about this, but it's different to say don't do this because it's bad, and I don't want you to be exploited because XYZ, and explain the why, especially for older kids. I mean, I have my oldest nephew is 8 years old and he's not a teenager yet, but man, he asks questions. So especially for kids that are really, wanting to challenge you on those things, it's important to explain the why. And like you said, sit there with them and get into their world and understand. Circle Project Dente says, talk to your kids about what they're looking at. You have to back it with information. Absolutely. What's up, Philip Drake? Philip Drake says, the man, the myth, the legend, Mark Stross. I like it. Backstrapping fins, you have to be proactive. Yes, I agree with him. Sad but true. You guys, if you have any questions for Mark Stross, he's one of America's leading technologists, which this way. He's invented and produced some of the most incredible technology in America, some of the biggest landmarks, and shows like The Tonight Show, NBC. We're honored to have him with us here tonight. And I'm really excited that he's putting his message out to the world in such an educational way that's so practical for people. So if you guys have questions for him, put it in the comments. We're going to keep building out this dialogue about not only the risks, but the solutions when it comes to kids on the internet today. So aside from the obvious, like predatory apps and content and people trying to target children, what are some of the main risk factors that you identify these days with children on the internet, Mark?
Well, our children are actually much more sophisticated than we realize, because unfortunately they're being trained at a much earlier age. And I hate to say this, because when I say this, I personally get really sad. But I'm going to now bring up something that most parents and most of us don't want to accept. Our children are losing their innocence. They are literally losing their innocence at earlier and earlier ages. And when you hand the smart device to your children, you're handing, now with AI and ChatGPT, you're handing not just the world's knowledge, but now the ability to have an artificial intelligence combine the world's knowledge. And if you don't think that's going to reduce their innocence instantly, it will. Now, the fact is, libraries reduced the innocence in the old days, and ever since we started keeping our history on paper and now digitally, There has been all kinds of technologies that have come around, like TV was considered to be a demon technology. So was radio, and now so is social media. So I am not going to overreact in those ways. But just like all of those transport systems of the past, the laws and the government and the societal understanding of what's occurring had to catch up. And we're in a very young stage with this hyperactive, incredible technology era that we're in, where things are just coming together so fast. And I think ultimately it's going to be very, very interesting to see how this all ends up in the long term, because you see, we have an acceleration going on. If you guys have not noticed, what is occurring is we have more information coming in, and it's making all of us in some ways smarter, but in many ways, because remember, we go back to the bias that I told you about, and we only want to see what we like, it's also making us dumber. And that's the strangest part of all of this, because if we are only going to look at things that we like, then ultimately at some point, we're not going to be looking at true information. And that I'm sad about. And I'm not calling anyone dumb. I'm saying it makes us dumber because it deprives us maybe of really useful information. And then we might say and do things that in the future we might not be so proud of. But we, at that moment, are going down the funnel that we created by our own bias, teaching the algorithm what we liked. And therefore we created the news that one day might actually hurt us. Our own ones.
Yeah, that makes sense. So this is maybe more for adults, but I'm sure this applies to children as well. What would one do to, I'm not saying just be open-minded to everything, but I'm saying to get out of your own funnel? How would one do that?
Well, I think what you have to realize is when you start to realize how funnels are created, then you start to realize that you have a little bit of responsibility to interject into your feed an alternative feed. So for me, I listen to Republican and Democratic and centrist and progressive and radical news. I listen to all of it because, frankly, if I'm going to draw any conclusion, I want to hear everyone's perspective. And you know what's really interesting, guys? When you start to listen to both sides, you start to hear them all screeching. And then you start to dilute it and you start to really listen. Start to realize all of us really want to be in the center. We just want to be heard. We want our side to have a chance to actually get what we want. And unfortunately, in a digital sense of the word, we're not getting what we want. And most of us don't even realize that when we sign a user agreement, which I absolutely feel needs to be changed to human agreement. Because if we have a human agreement, then we're treating people as human beings. And we need to treat anyone who's interacting with a digital system that could have AI associated with it as human with human rights. And this is where humanity comes into the title of my book. We have lost our humanity because we are treated instantaneously by these companies as users. I don't want to be a user.
Oof.
I want to learn, guys. I want to be taught. I want technology to be trusted so that way I could actually learn more and apply more of what I've learned to the world and create cooler technology. But unfortunately today, I can't even trust the science channels on YouTube any longer because they still go down the rabbit hole of whatever I was just watching. Yeah. And that means that I have to be very careful what I'm digesting. So I have to back up usually. And then I have to go and verify my sources. before I actually get one of my terms in the book is genned up. Genned up is when we take an overwhelming amount of information in and we get all angry about it. We get genned up and we explode into the world with our knowledge. But most of the time, it's our bias. It's our made up information.
Oof, that's so good. I want to, last night I was thinking more about your concept that I had read and heard you talk about being called a user. And it kind of finally clicked last night. And I'm almost embarrassed to say that, but I realized what you have been talking about this whole time and how much it matters. And just to summarize it, when you use a social platform, they make you agree to their terms. And normally most of us just press I agree and we don't read it. Now, in those agreements, they say you, the user, agree to use the platform. So another word for platform, you can replace that with you are a user of our company, our product. So you're not a human, you are a user. You are a consumer of our product. Now that's accurate, right? But what you're saying is that when we sign the agreement saying we are a user of their product or platform, it removes our human rights and it makes us simply not only just consumers, but actual users, similar to in the connotation of an addict, right? So I want you to explain that more and also your solution to it, because it's really cool.
Yeah. Excuse me. Seasonal little code. Yes. So think about it. We sign a user agreement today. And when you go into a user agreement, it gives you terms and conditions of many things that the technology company has rights to and very few rights that we actually get assigned back. Now, I want you guys to think about this concept right now. I am right now on TikTok with Kim, and we're doing this live feed. We're generating television type content. It's a little cruder, but the truth is this is a piece of content. And right now, TikTok has got people in the comment section watching this content that's being generated. And TikTok becomes more valuable every time we do this. So we are actually creating for TikTok value by just coming on. Now, I know when you become an influencer on TikTok, they will pay you back, and there are other forms of monetization, but that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about all of us now, not the few influencers, because it's actually a very few that make it to the monetization level. I'm talking about all of us. So that content for them is there to be monetized. That's their content that they can actually store forever. And that is your likeness and all of your content that's on their property, like this is becoming TikTok's property. And ultimately our rights in that user agreement are being assigned over to these companies. So what about a concept that when we're doing all of this, we acknowledge there's a value. We're human beings, not AI. We're not artificial. We're not deep fakes doing this. We're human beings. And don't we immediately have an assigned value? Does this not equate to some intrinsic currency? And that currency should be bidirectional. So from my perspective, just having a human agreement that comes to terms with the fact that we create human asset value for TikTok, that are talent, that's an asset. And we need to be treated as talent, like a movie star would be treated in a film, right? A movie star creates the likeness and the image and the video and does their stuff, and they create the vehicle that the director and producer and everyone else benefits from. So that's why they have unique rights in every studio agreement, because their image is going out to the world. So I just want everyone to think about, this is way deeper than just saying user versus human. It's really assigning human rights to what we're doing.
Yeah, that's super important. I've heard you talk as well about even beyond the the compensation people should get for putting their digital assets out there. There's also the concept of putting things out there that you may want to delete later. So, for example, teenagers today growing up posting pictures that they may regret later when they're applying for jobs. If they have had any data out there on the internet, it's there forever. It can't truly be deleted as of now. So you have a concept or a solution that you recommend, not only to expose the problem and how this works, and it's so important for people to understand that, but also your solution to how it should work, where we should be able to retract that content so that it doesn't harm us later.
Yes, I love the whole cryptocurrency space, because right now it's proving a really valuable point. And actually, I was just recently on stage with a cryptocurrency expert that also validated what I'm about to tell you guys. And so what is really cool is this is not me coming up with the technology that's not feasible. And this is not science fiction. This is actually doable today if there's a will and if all of us come together and demand it. So if crypto can be secured by a ledger, and the ledger is kept in the cloud, and everyone can have access to the ledger, so it's transparent, but it also encrypts the ownership of different denominations of crypto, and it explains who has what, and that ledger can be created and kept in the cloud, then all of our data with that same type of technology should be able to be deletable when we want to delete it. I have a question for everyone on this feed tonight. How many of you messed up and gone live with a picture or a feed that you're embarrassed by?
I have to think about it, probably.
Yeah. Now, I don't believe if you're a young person, you go out one night and you do something you're not proud of, why that is almost impossible to delete. I am not suggesting that we should whitewash our lives, but I am saying that back in the 80s and 70s when I grew up, you were able to recover from a mistake, right? You were able to actually live it down by living a good life, and it wasn't constantly being brought back by your enemies because it was always available. So one of the beautiful things I would like to do is to see us own our images that are put out on the internet with cryptocurrency type technology. And then when we want to revoke it, we revoke it, and it has to be revoked on all platforms. And I think that would be amazing. Then that would bring back ownership. That would also help with digital rights management for the movie industry and everyone else, because it would bring back solid ownership to a movie. You could own a movie. You probably heard just recently, there's a huge uproar in the PlayStation world about Discovery Channel pulling the plug on their deal with PlayStation and Sony. And now people who bought Discovery Channel videos are losing them. They're gone. Bam. They thought they owned them. Goodbye, videos. So the problem with it is those videos were attached to the Discovery Channel's digital rights management. If it's no longer there, the videos can no longer be on your PlayStation. Wouldn't it be cooler if those videos actually had a transfer of ownership to you digitally and if they were put into your cryptocurrency wallet? Yeah, that's the better approach. And we have to rethink the way we do everything digitally. So I hope I've not gone over people's heads. I'm trying to keep this super simple. But we need to establish ownership in the digital world with the ability to truly own something and transfer ownership from Discovery when you pay for it to your wallet, to your life. And it cannot be taken away from you just because a deal goes bad. You bought it. It's yours.
Yeah, 100% agreed. So what are some action steps that people can do to take action on this?
Well, first thing is we have to start having a dialogue about it. I'm starting to talk about something just like Elon Musk started talking about boring, SpaceX, and other very cool things. And then hopefully I will get people excited about this notion, and I will start having more brilliant people come to me and say, how can we actually make something like this happen? And then more brilliant people will get together and they will start solving some of these issues. Again, guys, I'm just here to teach you guys. I'm just here to start this dialogue. Philosophically, we got to start somewhere. So Kim, I just want to make it clear to everyone, this doesn't happen in a day. This happens with us talking about it, going to our local, very important. You want to change America, you don't do it at the federal level. You do it at the absolute local level. George Soros, in the way that he funded all of his nonprofits, actually has fundamentally changed America. And how he did it was getting into school boards, getting into local elections with mayors and other people. And kudos and my hat goes off to his results. His results are incredible. So the local is how you change America. We need to get local DAs in different cities looking at technology crimes differently to protect our children, for example. And we need DAs to actually take a much more bigger, just put it this way, we need the whole justice system in general to look at predators completely differently. And just really quick, I don't want to bore everyone, but Kim, this is something you and I talk about often. Guys, listen, if I right now tonight mentioned, the vaccine and the virus and a few other key words and January, rebellion, etc., suddenly there will be disclaimers at the end of this video, and automatically the AI will zero in that you're talking about the virus or you're talking about something else, and instantly get all these disclaimers. So how come when we're talking about children's age and we're talking about body parts and we're talking about actually, sexual activities, the AI suddenly becomes completely incapable
Right. When predators approach children on the
figuring
internet.
out a predator is going after a child. I don't believe it. And TikTok, programmers at TikTok, yes, I'm talking to you guys. Because you guys are creating some of the best algorithms in the world. We got to get better at this. Because this is happening all over. Or is this something that you really want to have happen? Because I don't think it should happen at all. With the technologies we have today, we can protect the children. But again, we need DAs that will prosecute. And we need a whole justice system that will actually get with the program here. And guess what? That all starts with you guys. You want to know how you do it? Local elections, local offices. And some of you run for office if you have common sense, if you really care about your children. And as I educate more on these values and with the book, I really go into a lot of detail of what you can do. And most importantly, though, guys, none of it's easy. All of it's going to require you to take some time to get involved and care. And I believe America's worth it. I'm not an American originally. I was born in England. I grew up in Switzerland and I immigrated. It took me 15 years to immigrate here. I love this country. As just becoming as a new American, in having a family now in America and seeing the potential of this country, I know it's within us to change what's occurring with technology and predators and the world. And again, it's not to destroy these platforms. It's actually for all of us to come together and work together to make these platforms safer and to make our lives safer. And more importantly, we all have to come to terms with our addiction.
So well said. I want to open it up to questions here. We have a few questions in the comments that we'll address shortly, but I also just want to summarize it because you covered a lot of information and I can identify different layers to the solutions in this conversation. So you're saying, number one, it starts with us And there's layers within that layer. So that means communicating with your children, implementing boundaries and safeguards. You've talked about VPNs and really specific things we can do for that. Then there's also ourselves, our own addictions, our own habits, and even culture. And then there's also at the local level, what can we do to actually get involved and make change there? Then at a more national or bigger level, there's how can we actually change the laws to adapt to today's digital culture? How can we protect ourselves as humans, not just users, on this digital platform we call the internet and all the information we're putting out there? And again, we always bring it back to how can we specifically safeguard children, because there's a different level of engagement that we should protect them from there. So I don't know if there's anything to add to that summary, and then I wanted to open it up to questions in the comments for you.
I'd love to take any questions, and I want to make it clear to anyone who wants to ask a question who's worried about offending or asking a question they might think goes against anything I've been saying tonight. You see, I don't need to be popular to educate. What I need to do is get a dialogue started with all of us. So please bring on new ideas. Tell me where I'm going wrong. Help me understand how to do this. So I want to have everyone get involved. About me. Yeah, sorry about that. The phone call came in. Did it come back? Yeah, sorry.
Yeah, I think you're back. There's some feedback in the back.
Did it come back?
Let me see if I can read some questions. So Desperado says, because you were talking about crypto earlier, and you were talking about the concept of crypto with blockchain, you can put information out there, have it assigned to you, and then later retract it. I'll wait for Mark's technical difficulties, but I'm going to answer that question. I'm going to have him answer that question, Desperado. Does crypto get taxed? Does anyone else have any questions for Mark when we get him back here shortly? Desperado, I'll get to your two questions. Thank you so much. And you guys, like he said, please feel free to ask questions, even if there's no stupid question, you know what I mean? Part of this dialogue is to make sure people are informed and can really absorb this information. It's not enough to hear it, but it's more about the practical application of it. So I'll see if Mark can join us back here. And if anyone else wants to join us in this box, I'll send a few invites here as well. See if we can have a full-on discussion. If y'all can join us, we'd love to have you. If not, no worries. I'm going to bring Mark back in to answer a couple questions if you guys want to put them in the comments or if you want to join us here in the box. So, all right, Mark's back. The first question from Desperado, when you were talking about crypto, is does crypto get taxed?
Okay. I'm not a crypto expert on specifically taxation, so I would prefer to punt on that. What I will tell you, though, is that really depends. There's crypto that's done with different banks around the world, and I'm sure that stuff has to be taxed because the banks can't be associated with it. But I'm also have heard of schemes where people are trying to dodge tax. I would recommend not doing crypto and dodging tax. That definitely is not a good combo. But again, I don't know enough about this to really, I'm dangerous, but I've heard a lot of stories of different tax dodges with crypto.
Yeah, be careful there. Desperado also says, I was told that cameras are built in tablets to watch users. Wonder if that's true. Does anyone know? So for example, on my laptop right here, there's a camera, or on this iPad. Are those devices watching us?
All right. As the technologist, let's get into one of the really scary, but okay. Supposedly, the CIA and NSA have the ability to go into the chips of the circuits within the actual little miniature cameras that are behind the laptop screen. And without turning the little LED on, be able to turn the camera on without the LED. Now, technically, Dell and other manufacturers specifically made those parts so that was not possible, that if the camera goes on, the LED goes on. So you couldn't create a software loop where the two can't be on. But there was a generation of laptops where that was not in the design because no one even thought about people doing something like that, going on, turning off the LED and snooping on people. So on the one hand, the manufacturers are saying, we've got your back on this. But on the other hand, as we've seen with Apple and Google and Samsung, battery gate, pen gate, I can go through all of the little gates. But we've found that we don't always get told the complete truth. And so I would say to everyone, I believe that it is possible that the security services can do far more than they want us to know. And I think these cameras are far more vulnerable than we would like to think about. But I have absolutely no proof, because this really goes down to an incredible small amount of people in groups. It's not just the chips guys. It's far more involved than that. If you knew how smart the smartest programmers are in the world and how smart this level of programming to hack at this level is, it is beyond scary. These people are smart as can be, and they come up with the most amazing workarounds. So as far as I'm concerned, if you have a camera in your office facing you and you don't put a cover on it, then you must just assume you're on camera. And I think that's a safe way to approach life. Most new laptops have a little cover that you can slide across. Now, again, the microphone could still be live on your laptop. Again, there's another area where you could be vulnerable. And you could, though, make the camera a little bit more secure by using, a shutter device. But please, if you got a camera facing you, just assume it could be on. And, lastly, we sometimes make stupid mistakes that have nothing to do with the government. We think we're all done with a live feed. We keep our cameras going, and those go and get us busted. So be careful. We take it a little bit for granted that right now I'm broadcasting this image out to a live feed, and I really have no idea where it's going to go. So if you're going to do that, be careful. Really, think about what you're doing more, because these things have consequences. Everything I'm saying tonight is going to have a consequence that 10 years from now, I'm going to have to look at this tonight and see how well I did. So the point is, there's always a consequence.
Yeah, no, that's a good safety first approach. I have another question more specific to kids using devices for gaming, to watch stuff, whatever it is. So, okay, the original question in the comments was, are our cameras watching it? Can it be used to spy on us? So there's, the concern about whoever, CIA, etc. watching. But then I'm more tailoring this to hackers or predators or people with nefarious intent. Could they hack into devices like whatever electronics that kids use in order to identify them, geolocate them, and or prey on them?
Okay, so that's a big topic. So let's just immediately cut one part of the topic out. Unless it's the NSA and stuff, most of our devices, like PlayStation cameras and everything to do with, computers and most PCs, you're not going to have that problem. The predator is not going to be able to log on and force a connection onto your kid's laptop and do that. No, unfortunately, the truth of this is your kid will bring the predator into their life. So they would do that by you introducing them through an app, or they will open up a DM channel, or you have all this security and firewalled security and router security for your house, but your child will use, like speed tests VPN to bypass all of your security, and then they go off and they get solicited because they go to unsafe places. So most of the evidence I mean, not just most, the majority of the evidence suggests we bring the predators into our homes. We do all of it with our own tech. We literally allow them in. You know, Kim, when you pretended to be a de-aged Kim and you were 14 years old, let me ask you a question. Could they have gotten to you had you not had the smartphone in your hand?
No, even though all I did was download an app, a social media app from the App Store, and create a profile with a baby face child, had I not done that, obviously I would not have been faced with those predators. Now, to be clear, I didn't send any friend requests or message requests or go live streaming or comment. Like, I did nothing to get attention. I was existing as a child. But to your point, had I been a real child and had I not had that device and or not had access to download apps and set them up and use them, it would have at least been a fence at the top of the cliff for sure.
So, as soon as the child gets the app and goes in, you as the parent lose all of your security, just like that. So then it comes down to the training of the child and the training of how the child will approach a situation where they could lose their innocence. And it's up to us, I believe, to gently lose a little bit of innocence with our children, to teach them how not to lose all of their innocence. And the way I recommend, again, is going into their world and teaching them through the examples of their world, not telling them, don't go in and everything you're doing is bad, but actually going into their apps, going, wow, that's really cool. You know, that's a little suggestive. And if that went too far, be careful. That could be really bad, but I really love that other person. And you know, our children really do want to please us. And if they see us genuinely happy in something that they're happy about, even if you have to maybe fabricate it a little bit, you're going to find the results are pretty astounding. Because what you're going to start getting is a reality check on your assumptions, so you'll be more helpful to them. And B, you will get a reality check on what they like. And I guarantee you, what you think is not really what they're doing. And that's not just me speaking, that's study after study. There's a complete disconnect between the parent and the kid.
Oof, that's so true. I think communication is so key. Again, I'm not a parent, but I know a lot of parents ask me when I do these types of prevention educational talks, they ask, how do I talk to my kid about this? And I don't mean this to judge them in any way, but it's sad to me that, you know, I'm a stranger on the internet, for one, and for two, I'm not a parent and I don't know their kid and I don't know their situation and their dynamic. But it's sad to me that parents feel helpless, as if they can't communicate with their kid won't receive it or listen or accept it, and or they don't know where to start. So again, I'm not a parent. I have nephews and nieces that I'm very close to, and I've had similar conversations with my 6 and 8-year-old nephew. And I know them, so I know how to speak to them. I don't know everyone else's kid, right? But there's an age-appropriate way to explain the risks, to explain the why, and to tell them, to give them an action plan. So for example, with my little kid nephews, something like, okay, because I definitely encourage them to watch educational material on YouTube and things like that. But when I give them my phone, yes, I'm putting safeguards on my phone and they have certain things locked down. But even then, I give them the phone and say, okay, you can watch this documentary about sharks or whatever. But please check with me before switching to a different video. I want you to have fun and watch this video, but I need to make sure that it's safe for you. I need you to know that there's videos, there's content on this app, and sometimes it's not appropriate for children. So even just a little reminder like that, but even on a broader level. So they call me Teeny, but like they know that their Auntie Teeny works with a group of good guys who get bad guys who are trying to hurt children. Now, obviously that's me oversimplifying it for my nephews, but even saying something like that and they ask questions, well, what does that mean? What are bad guys? What are they trying to do? Well, sometimes there are bad guys who want to hurt children, and sometimes they want to do bad things. So Teeny and other good guys, get the bad guys and we make sure they don't hurt children. So I want you guys to be aware that when you're on the internet, if you see things like this, if someone messages you like this, you're not in trouble, but I need you to go tell your mom or come tell me, because we need to make sure these people are safe. So that's like oversimplified, because obviously it's a series of conversations. But there is a way to simplify it. There is a way to make it age appropriate without fear mongering them, and also without completely taking away their access to technology and the internet, because there are a lot of beneficial things. So what do you think about communication with children? How have you handled that with your kids?
I think, Kim, communicating with children in the new era of the smartphone means that you are dealing with a human being that has the world's knowledge at their fingertips. So ultimately, they're actually wiser. No, I shouldn't say wiser. They're smarter than we are, not as wise, because they haven't lived as long. And in the fact that they can look things up so fast, you can't just assume or be an authoritative individual and really change their mind. What you need to do, and this is what I have found is most successful with my grown-up children now, but as they were growing up, is you have to reason with them as equals with the information, which is very hard, because you say, well, a child is not as mature. I'm going to try to reason with a 7-year-old. Yeah, you are, kind of, because in many respects, the 7, 8, 10-year-old actually might have more information about the subject you're talking about than you do. And their little hands can actually look up information faster than you can speak it. And then they can actually draw on facts. And as soon as you actually say one thing that's not right, that they can prove that you're not completely accurate on, you lose your own narrative. So what I've learned is the only way to actually really communicate with kids today is get in their world, let them teach you, and then offer your wisdom, your advice, your life, and say, I understand that, but I'd like you to consider this. Mm-hmm. And if you say it with a warm distinction that you also are trusting that they have knowledge, then you're actually asking them to switch their knowledge for your knowledge. It's a transaction. And usually a transaction goes down smoothly. It's not an argument. It's not an experience of a tug of war. And we tend to get into tug of wars with our kids. And I'm trying to inspire parents to use information to get rid of the tug of war, but to make it fun. It's a transfer of information. So the child has to be a co-equal with you to a certain extent. Now, please use your common sense to that statement. I don't mean they're co-equal in wisdom, but in that moment, in that transaction, let them be co-equal. Then you're going to find the outcomes change. That's the way I found in my family. I changed a lot of narratives.
Yeah, that's so important. And to your earlier, one of your primary talking points is really get to know your child's world, share it with them. Don't just come in and try to take it away from them or just judge them for whatever. So when you do establish that credibility, like you say, it's easier for them to accept it, but they also know where you're coming from. I have a lot of these discussions with different friends of mine who have kids, and they know what I do in working and combating child exploitation. And a lot of them, I get different reactions, and I observe these different patterns because I also want an understanding of how this is working for people in practical application. So I was talking recently to a friend of mine who's a dad with, beautiful teenage daughters. And he was saying, oh, that's so, like the conversation was just kind of making him like, oh, it's so bad out there. It's so hard to protect kids. And I get that, like, hats off to parents, because it is not easy, and their kids in school, and, there's kids her age that she's dealing with, and there's older boys, and there's all these nuances to it. But he was saying, oh, he was getting frustrated, of course, as I can imagine any dad would. But he was telling me a story about how he walked in on his daughter talking to, like a stranger danger, talking to he didn't know if it was a man or whoever it was, on the phone, and he came in and he got mad and he took the phone away and now she can't get on the phone and this was like, so again, I'm not a parent and I don't say this with judgment, but I was like, well, here's the thing. If you just rip the phone away, you may be teaching her to now hide things from you. And I know that you didn't want to see that. I know that in your mind, like in your fatherly alpha male protective mind, you were just protecting her and doing the right thing. I don't disagree with your mentality there, but the approach long term, you want this to be well received. You want this to be a sustainable solution. This girl's like 13, so she's got a ways to go in terms of the teenage years, right? What if instead of reacting emotionally, and again, I know this is hard for humans, but what if you were to sit next to her and listen to this conversation? What if you were to understand who she's talking to, and instead of making her feel like, I'm not saying she's doing something right, but I'm saying instead of making her feel like she's doing something wrong, understand who this potentially predatory adult is, what his approach is, what his tactics are, maybe probably what his intent is. But that's how you could help her navigate that. Because if you came in and didn't listen and stole the phone away, now she's like, oh, my dad's so strict and now I have to hide things from him. So that might have the opposite results, right? It's also, when we unpack the tactics that predators use, predators often use a tactic called grooming, which, oversimplified, is gradually desensitizing the victim to harmful or inappropriate behaviors. Very summarized, massive tactic that's played out in most, if not all, instances of child harm, and words we can't use on this platform. So that being said, because predators are strategic like that, and because they have that gradual approach, part of that game is isolating the child and helping them feel safe, secure, and secretive with the predator. Again, isolating them from their parents or protectors. So again, in this scenario, if you rip the phone away, now she's mad, now she might be, angry at you or whatever. And if she's able to access that predator again, and kids will figure out that way, the predator may be able to, oh, your dad doesn't get it, but he just doesn't understand you, but I understand you, and this is our little secret. It could open the door to a more secretive relationship now between your daughter and this predator, and she may have, thinks she can't trust you. So it's a pretty specific example, but I feel like that applies pretty broadly in our overall approach with children. It may be difficult not to respond emotionally when we feel like, because I get it, you're a dad, you want to protect your daughter. Like, I'm not saying you're wrong here, but I'm saying the sustainable solution may require consistent communication and more of an easing into that approach. Do you agree, Mark?
Yeah. When you are parenting today, you are, again, you're competing with so many other pieces of information that the child has been subjected to. So when you give your opinion, just remember, you're just now one of a very noisy, little community that your children are listening to. Think of it as the town square. Their town square is very noisy, and you're just going to be one of the voices in the town square. So how do you become parent again? I have a really cool story about this, and it kind of goes back to the idea of who is in control. Is the dog wagging the tail, or is the tail wagging the dog? And this is why this whole situation with our kids is so hard. So think of it this way. If we just assume right now that we can control and we can willpower, we can give willpower to our kids, and our kids will actually discern what is good and bad, then why is it that probably, if I asked everyone on this feed tonight give up TikTok, I don't believe you would. It wouldn't matter how bad I painted TikTok. If I said to you, this is a completely unpatriotic app, you have to delete it, this is doing harm to the United States, how many of you would delete it? If I could prove to you those allegations, how many of you would delete it? I think the answer would be pretty much zero. So therefore, if you're not willing to acknowledge how addicted you all are, then don't you see the war that's going on for our kids' brains, for our kids' habits, for keeping predators out of their lives, takes on a completely different form, because we have to be honest with ourselves. One more thing. Pornography and prostitution and sexual drawing started during the caveman era. You go into caves in Europe, you will see their version of stick pornography. So we've had pornography since the very beginning of time. And I do believe that pornography is instantaneously perversion. That's my belief. I don't believe that. What I believe is that most people, regardless of what they will say or won't say, will be turned on by different images in sexual connotations. So if we realize that once you have handed a phone to a child, that child's going to be bombarded with the same images that might seduce you, then perhaps you can have a much more legitimate conversation with your kids if you're willing to realize how many times you get titillated during the day. So when you're talking about willpower, we need to have an honest discussion. And this is why I always say it starts with you, me. And you really want your kids to really appreciate you, then admit that you get turned on by porn as a guy, and you know what? It really takes away from that loving experience with your wife or with a person. But hey, remember this. If that person's been doing like an extensive 4-hour TikTok, binge session, enjoying the heck out of all of the stuff they like to watch for 4 hours, there are studies that now show that if you're on social media and you're enjoying your feeds, enjoying your delicious, buffet of your biases, then you will lose the ability to socialize. Your brain will shut down because different portions of the brain open up to receive all the content, as your social side of your brain, your ability to speak, to communicate, to love, shuts down because you're now having a relationship with the incoming information and the device that's giving it to you. So it takes a much longer period to get out of the device to be with human beings. So now I want you to think about the average American family where everyone's using their apps. They're trying to communicate, but they're all shut down. They're all a little bit irritated that they got to talk to someone who doesn't apparently understand the world the way they do. Isn't it obvious the way the world works? Just look at what I'm looking at. Why don't you believe what I believe? And everyone's a little bit irritated with each other, and no one's really communicating because our brains have shut down because we're receiving this incredible influx of our own bias.
So true.
And guys, I'm sorry, there's no way out of this. This isn't a maybe. This is unfortunately all of us. And I don't think we're doomed neither. Let's start a dialogue about it. Let's be honest about it. And I'm not here to tell you I'm any better than any of you guys. I'm just a teacher. And I'm probably just as screwed up as the worst of you. Because the truth is, I'm just a human being. So I want to talk about the humanity and technology and how we can make the humanity be in our lives again, not have technology strip our humanity out of our lives.
That's so important. So you said, because it's a good explanation, I think people are not aware of the impact it has on our brain, even as adults. So while that might be true, one solution is that we could simply set limitations for ourselves, whether that means setting an alarm, setting a reminder, setting limitations that allow you to only access certain apps or sites for a certain amount of time a day. I work in social media marketing, as you know, and it can be distracting if I log in to do something productive for work and then there's all these things feeding me distractions. I have to set limitations sometimes where I have a 5-minute limit and it says time limit's up, and I'm like, oh, I've been distracted for 5 minutes. Let me go back and do what I need to do. So some things like that are helpful for me. Are there other things that people should implement, even as adults, that can help mitigate those
You
risks?
reminded me of the key one. Are you guys ready for this? This is the roller coaster one. This is the one that's going to make me suck with any youngster or anyone who's going on a road trip over Christmas right now, and any of you parents that are listening to me. When I arm you with this one, wow. Okay, I'm going to get super unpopular. I'm sure there's going to be a demographic curve. Anyone, 18, less popular, 17, deadly, 13-year-olds will not want to speak to me ever again. So let's start. Mom and dad, it's okay for your kids to get bored. Yeah. So let me explain this, okay? You're on a road trip going in the Grand Canyon. And you say to your kids, look left, look right, look up, look down. And what do you have? You got this going on. Or maybe. So, what happens if 2 hours before you got to the Grand Canyon, you took the phones, put them in the trunk, locked the key, get in the car, and you put some earplugs in? You're going to need them. And this is what you're going to hear. I'm bored. 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 You're the meanest parents in the universe. How can you take away my technology? Okay, let's see here. You're a terrorist. You are violating my rights. I've heard all of it. So, having said all that, do you know what's going to happen around hour 1 to 2? Your kids will be in the back of that car, and they're going to be forced, because they're bored, to look out the window. Now, if you happen to stop the car, just imagine you're going through a national park now, and you stop at some really cool site, and you get out, and these teenagers without their phones start a little nature hike. Now, imagine them at first. They're going to be all grumpy, so someone's going to stub their toe or hit something they're not supposed to hit. Now they got something going on with their body. It's hurt. It's maybe scratched. It's maybe bleeding. And they still have to continue. And as they continue, they start to realize there's bugs. Oh, it's a little hot. I'm starting to sweat. Ooh, wow, this is real. Oh my gosh, I'm smelling stuff. Wow, look at that. Oh, bird just went across. Oh my gosh, wow. But they're really just in a forest. Not very much is going on, but in their world, in their mind, it's starting to light up, because what's starting to happen is they're starting to learn how to survive on instincts again. When a kid tells you, I'm learning the world through Call of Duty by playing a computer game or Fortnite or whatever it might be, they're in a controlled environment that there's only so many things you can do with the joystick, with the device, and with the game, but the environment is preset. As soon as they exit your car in this beautiful nature hike, they're going to be dealing with reality. And when you deal with reality, it builds synapses in the brain, and it actually makes you smarter, because you have to be put into situations that you've never been put before, and you have to allow your brain to think, not be fed like we're doing tonight, but our brains to think. Thinking takes a little bit of boredom. If you think about it, you actually have to have a pause in what you're doing to think. So everyone, for Christmas, take the phones away, put your kids into nature, and start to teach them the value of boredom. because that is a secret weapon to start to teach your kids how to actually be warriors against predators. And you're going to be surprised by this. But if they can think better, and if they can think on their feet, when that DM goes south and they realize they're in a bad place, they will have survival instincts that they've learned from nature that will kick in their social life. Trust me, it all is part of one system. You have to educate a brain by making a brain fend for itself. You can't just feed a brain and expect it to know life. So guys, that's my ultimate advice to parents. We usually bring that in later because I know it's an unpopular premise, but I've done it now. It's out on TikTok.
No, I think it's important because it's true. Not only does it force them to be creative and to think outside the screen, but it also exposes them to a lot they would otherwise experience in a virtual way. So Desperado asked another great question. He said, I always wondered if gaming has an influence on school shooters. These games nowadays are violent. Just so you know, we got to be careful about the word. We say pew pew on TikTok.
Right. I understand that and was very aware of that. So let's just go straight to the jugular. Our society, since the 1980s, the Rand Corporation coined it, has been going through a series of truth decay scenarios. So let me answer this in such a way that I want, Desperado, I really love your question. And I want you to feel honored by my answer. I'm not going to give you the classical answer, and I'm not going to give you the answer you've heard time and time again. Because the answer that you're looking for is a yes or no, a war on or war against, yes, no. It doesn't work that way. This is so much more involved, and this is actually very cool, because when I get to the bottom of this, just 1 second, nose, I think you all will go, wow, I get it. So guys, let's go back in our history books. Let's go 500 years back. Let's go to the Renaissance, or maybe just before that. Let's go to, I don't know, the Roman Empire, a little further back. The Romans, when they went to war, were extremely violent. I mean, war in that era was violent. Death was, if it was by the state, was by crucifixion, and people would be hung and they would decay right in front of you as you're walking up and down the street. So if we're going to blame computer games for the evils of society, I would just suggest that in history, we're in actually a period of time where most people see less evil than they did in history. But the difference is that we are not willing to acknowledge today that we are affected by it. And this is part of truth decay. We're not willing to be honest. Human beings are an incredibly violent species. We like to point out differences among ourselves and among countries, and we love to find differences. And then we love to put ourselves on pedestals and proclaim we're better than the other that we're proclaiming against. So when you look at the history of civilization, Call of Duty is nothing, or the idea of violence and shooter games. Because the truth is, then what about movies, war movies? What about television shows that have violence consistently? You know, tell me what show doesn't have guns in it. And apart from sitcoms and, you know, morning television, most evening television shows will bring a gun, or will bring in some horror element, or will bring in sex. So when you take the three there and you're going back to truth decay, and now you go back to a kind of moral decay. So today, we can't even have an honest dialogue about the fact that we, in our computer games, are turned on, that means the player, the people paying for the computer game, by incredibly violent computer games. We like to see blood splattered across our screen to depict us getting a hit. So we all have to own that. But that's part of our culture that goes back thousands of years. That is what we are. We're violent. And so can I blame the computer game more than I can blame the television show, more than I can blame the movie or the history book or the fact that we are violent? No. But this is what I would tell you is different. And this is why I told you you weren't going to get a standard answer. The delivery system into people's brains is completely different. Because remember, we talked about just recently about the fact that it's great to have a child bored because you can put them outside and they can learn about natural circumstances by what happens in nature. Well, if they saw someone crucified, if they saw someone actually, on their road that had done maybe by that community standard had done something wrong, so they will put on the crucifix, they would look at that person and they would be able to have a kind of a social dialogue. They would know the person had done evil and bad and everything else. But in the context of our delivery system of how we show and depict evil today, we make it cool for you to be a superhero that it actually goes and exterminates evil. And the more incredibly violent that you actually exterminate the evil, we actually reward you for it. And then we really try desperately to try to find studies that say it doesn't affect our brain and it doesn't affect our kids and it doesn't make us more violent. How is that possible? Because I learned everything I needed to know about rifles and military weapons from Call of Duty when it first went on the market. Because before then, I really was not into guns and I never even looked into guns. So the idea of me saying that my exposure to that actually occurred with the computer game is kind of true. And so from my perspective, I would say our kids are exposed today directly to an incredible amount of information about how to do harm to each other. And we reward people who figure out virtually how to harm people, and therefore to say it doesn't affect us would be completely, I don't see any way not to not say there's not going to be a bleed over into everyone's life. I hope that's a good answer.
Yeah, there's definitely an effect, and that's measurable not only on the physiological response, meaning the way it affects your body, your nervous system, your mindset, etc. There's been studies I'm sure you've seen of even the impact of watching a TV show, a horror show, an action movie before bed. So there's the impact of the blue light on your melatonin levels and your sleep levels, but there's specifically an impact on your nervous system that elevates, I'm going to oversimplify, elevates your energy so that you're more alert and more hyper aware of a attack, even though it's not in real life, but your body reacts in the same way. It starts excreting adrenaline and all these things to keep you in the fight, to protect you when you're actually trying to sleep. So we know for sure that a kid, especially when they're immersed in this technology where they have like this tunnel vision playing these games for 1, 2, 3, 5, 10 hours, it would absolutely affect their psyche, their connection with reality, their connection to other humans. And then again, I'm always going to bring it back to making themselves readily available to the person on the other side of the screen who may be a predatory adult. And to your point, if we're not immersed in our kids' world, we don't know what's going on. If we don't know who they're gaming with, we should not assume it's another kid just because it's a kid game. We should not assume it's a little girl just because the profile picture or name is that of a little girl. We should always verify. So there's a level of communication and trust with your kid, but I need parents to realize, as I experienced when I'm acting as a decoy in our counter-trafficking ops, when I'm acting as a child on the internet, the kid may be doing nothing wrong at all. The kid may simply be existing on the internet doing nothing at all, but the strategic predators do reach out to them. They do aggressively approach them. Some of these first lines, Some of the first sentences when they slid into my DMs, thinking it's a child, were the most intensely inappropriate things that, again, it's not even always a gradual process. Sometimes they go right in for the jugular. But sometimes it is more, sometimes that grooming process can be a lot more gradual. So when predators approached me on the internet thinking I was a child, sometimes they'd be very assertive and say really disgusting pornographic things. Sometimes they'd say things like, hey, what would you do for $500? Sometimes they would talk to me like a friend and then later say something predatory. But here's the point. If you're a 12-year-old teenage, whatever age teenager, and someone says, hey, what would you do for $500? That might pique your interest. You may start responding and asking more questions that the predator is happy to answer. And the predator may start baiting you with other demands. Well, let me see. Well, send me a picture first. Well, what about, they're already getting assets from these children sometimes before the child knows what's even happening. So there's a lot of layers to this, but specifically when the virtual world is what children experience more often than the real world sometimes, especially with social interaction, it can create a very warped perspective of human interaction and what's normal, what's appropriate versus what they're experiencing in their games or chat rooms or hidden places on the internet. I'm concerned about the parents who don't want to be helicopter parents. I've many peers my age and older who have teenagers and kids who say, well, I'm not crazy like that. I'm not going to check on their device. I'm not going to check their phone every day. I'm not going to be a helicopter parent. Now, Mark, you and I have both seen too much, but we're both very balanced and calm in our approach. So what would you say to a parent who genuinely says, I trust my kid and I don't want to be a helicopter parent?
Well, I would ask that parent, why are you putting your beautiful creation out into the world without protection? Why are you not willing to engage in your single duty today, which is to create a shield around our beautiful kids? You see, a helicopter parent, I love that when someone says, gosh, if I look at their phone and I find something I really don't want to see, I've violated their privacy. Well, my question to them is, when the jackass does his predatory activities and claims your youngster, claims them, then what will it matter? No.
Right.
You'll feel really bad and you'll go, why didn't I get more involved? Guys, listen, I've seen through Kim, unfortunately, in this organization. There is no such thing as a helicopter parent. If you're even thinking that way, then you're actually not paying attention to the teaching, and the teaching is simple. We are in an extremely different time period. We need each other. We need communities. We need to help each other. We're all somewhat addicted. We're all not paying attention. And my question to that parent that says that, so what do you have time in your life for? And if it's for golf, tennis, watching television, watching movies, then I would say you maybe have the time to do what I'm suggesting. And what's even better is you might stop your child from losing their innocence. And even more extraordinary, you might capture a predator before they take it out on your child and get them off the street. For me, that's cool. That's what I'd like to do.
Oh yeah, 100%. We're going to get a lot more of those. So for those who don't know, Veterans for Child Rescue is a nonprofit. These are real pictures of real counter-trafficking operations. Some of them are in our documentary, but we work with law enforcement to put bad guys behind bars. And we have 100% conviction rate. So far, everyone who's been arrested has been convicted. Now, there are some other pending warrants and some people who still need to be served. But it is important to me that we change the culture to one that is not tolerant of children being hunted and preyed upon when they go to these devices to be informed or entertained. It's not okay that they're being hunted, point one. Point two, it's not okay that predators are acting without limitation, that they're so emboldened, that they're so fluent, that they're able to directly target, that the technology that blocks us from saying things they don't like us to say does not block them from sending hundreds of harmful, we call them harmful images. I saw more images and videos of adult male genitalia in the 2.5 days that I was pretending to be a child on the internet than I've probably seen in my entire adult life. I need parents to know that. I'm an adult. I can handle it. Don't worry about me. What I'm saying is that your children cannot unsee this, point one. Point two, I did nothing to ask for it. Aside from never would I ever, there's very strict laws about entrapment to make sure that these people, barely people, stay behind bars. There's no form of flirting with men on the internet. This is simply me with a baby-faced, child-looking profile picture, and people we are just letting them incriminate themselves. But point three, these platforms are not only intentionally not protecting children, they are also profiting from the exploitation of children that's happening on their platform. They're profiting off every minute that every user spends on their user base. The advertisers and all the other ways that these platforms are monetized, they know that these adult predatory people are flooding into the DMs of a 12-year-old looking child who's telling them in writing their age and other indicators of being a child. These platforms know. You guys, thank you for the gifts. You're amazing. All the donations and the gifts and all these things go to help the nonprofit, so we appreciate your help. I'm very impassioned about this because I've done a few of these counter-trafficking ops this year. And again, if I, as hardened as I am, if I have to take days, weeks to physically, mentally, emotionally, and spiritually recover from what I see while I'm hunting predators on the internet by just pretending to be a child, I need you to think about what your child is experiencing, the way it warps their imagination and their understanding of adult and child relationships, friendships, and what's safe and what's appropriate and what's not. I need you to realize that your child is being approached by predatory content or people in some way, in some form, if they have access to the internet, which most children do. I need you to realize that when, not if, but when predators approach them, they need to know what to do. Your child needs to be empowered with not only the knowledge and the awareness, but also the steps, the action steps. What do? They need to know what stranger danger is and what it means when they come in with these predatory remarks, and they need to know that they can trust you, the parent, the adult, the caretaker, not only to be honest and tell you the truth about what's happening, but that you will listen, full stop, you will listen, you will take it seriously, and you will take the appropriate action. Once again, if a child is coming to you and telling you something, even if you don't like hearing it, please don't get the child in trouble. Please listen, full stop, every time. Listen, and just realize that you may not like what they're saying, but the child is trying their best in their own way to communicate something they may not understand. But if you've done your job to communicate with your child and your child knows, hey, there's some stranger danger stuff. Hey, mom, there's this guy saying this weird stuff. They should know that they can come and show you those things and be like, I don't know what's happening here. And you'll be like, hey, thank you, let me check. Hey, I'll be right back. The kid's not in trouble. The kid did the right thing. They need to know that you got their back. They need to know that you're going to take them seriously. And let's pretend that nothing's wrong. Let's pretend that some spammer came in with some random things that aren't harmful and the kid's like, hey, something's weird here, please still encourage that child that they did the right thing. Don't just be like, oh yeah, that's nothing. Please don't just brush it off. Again, this is not judgment. I know that everybody's busy, but I'm saying these little things really matter because they're training the kids. The kids are gonna be like, oh, that's no big deal. Okay, never mind. They may not come to you next time. If you're like, oh, okay, well, that's some spam. I'm going to block them. Hey, thank you for letting me know you did the right thing. You're awesome, man. Good job. That's why I trust you. You know what I mean? If you reinforce those beliefs, not only does the kid realize, oh, okay, I'm not in trouble, first of all, and I'm doing the right thing by doing this, but also, hey, this parent or caretaker can filter this for me. I don't have to try to figure this out and be confused by this. I can go rely on this caretaker or parent to help me. And if it's cool, it's cool, and I get my phone back and I did the right thing. And if it's not cool, they're going to protect me. That type of dynamic and communication is so important. Again, I'm not a parent. I don't give parenting advice, but I've heard from way too many children and survivors that something started that was off and they tried to report it and they were brushed off. And I know if I sound extreme, it's because I work in this industry and I know too much and I see too much and I'm trying to prevent more kids from experiencing it. But way too many survivors, probably everyone that I've talked to, tried to report something at some point and it was brushed off or not taken seriously or disregarded. And then it continued and often got worse. So I'm begging you guys, listen, take them seriously, and take appropriate action.
Yeah, I want to really second what Kim just said. Kim had an extraordinary upbringing, and ironically, I had a completely inverse upbringing to Kim in Switzerland, and I don't want to tonight because I believe that's a session all on its own. I mean, there's some incredible stories here, but the fact is, Kim today is. And I don't mean this in a negative way, Kim, and I think you can actually explain it your way, but is also a victim of how her life began, just as I am myself. And so one of the things I find fascinating is when you rob kids of innocence, this is where I'm going, Kim, both of us had our innocence just yanked from us at a very young age. And it did have a ramification. It affected us literally for the rest of our life. One of the reasons Kim and I became friends was over this, actually. It was actually when we mutually found out how we had the weirdest upbringings and we basically started connecting war stories with each other. I suddenly realized the lack of innocence, when that is taken from you as a kid, that's probably the most profound thing that you can't take back. So for me, going back to, a parent saying, well, I don't want to get involved after seeing what's happened to Kim, what's happened to me, what's happened to all these kids, what's happened to the world. Yeah, we got to get involved. It's not even optional,
Yep.
in my opinion.
Yep. No, I agree. I'd rather someone I know this should be taken with a grain of salt. I'd rather someone be too extreme or too protective when it comes to protecting children than to be like, oh no, I can't be a helicopter parent, I'm gonna do nothing. Now, obviously, I prefer balance and I recommend balance. There is a solution in the middle ground. But if I had to pick one extreme, and I'm not saying you do, I'd rather parents be overly aware and overly protective than to just assume like, oh no, my kid's got this. Someone likened it one time, and I think this is such a good analogy. Giving your kid unlimited, unsupervised access to the internet is like giving your child a loaded weapon. Just being like, here you go, have fun. There needs to be training, there needs to be education around the power that this device holds, both in terms of accessing endless information. And you can learn pretty much anything on the just by consuming this free information in the palm of your hands. And also, there's a lot of risks that they should be aware of.
For the parents listening to us tonight, I'm going to try to be very diplomatic how I just explain this. But are we okay, Kim?
Yeah, we're good. Sorry, I got a call. Go ahead.
Okay. So, everyone in America probably is unaware of this, but the statistics have changed on people taking care of their sexual desires and needs by themselves. So I'm hoping I'm describing this. This is both men and women. Now, back in the 80s, it was average for a man maybe to say, well, I've done that once during the day. But now we're in a situation where we have young kids doing it 3, 4, 5 times a day. On average, they're spending 3 to 5 hours looking at stuff to auto turn them on, and autoerotica and all of that. And what is so amazing is that we are really not talking about it. We're just kind of brushing it under the rug. But there's a complete change in the way all of us experience each other. There's a kind of an objectifying reality that we are diminishing both sexes, and we've become literally images on screens, and we're learning how to get turned on by those images. But then that takes away from our dialogue with each other. And it's so telling that when was the last time you heard the media or heard any of these rocking scientists that come on and philosophers really say, we really completely changed. In the last 30 years, we've changed the way we do intimacy. And then we have the declining birth rate. Not the fact that we are not making love as much. Well, in Western culture, we're not. That is absolutely true. But the truth is, we also have a declining sperm count in males. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that if people are constantly at it and wanting everything, like hedonism, like the Roman Empire, there will be a ramification and a consequence. So the predators, in my opinion, are as much a byproduct of us not wanting to be honest with how bad the real problem is. And the real problem is it's affecting millions of us, and none of us are really willing to come clean. And, if a kid is wasting that amount of time in doing something that's between them, a screen, and themselves, and they're having a relationship with that screen that is so intense, then I'm going to ask just one question of every parent listening to me tonight. How much of life are they actually missing out on? How much learning could they do in life? How much experiences are they actually not experiencing because they're actually going to a site that is owned by a corporation that's going to show them titillating information that then will make the person spend an incredible amount of time and actually be changing the very way they do relationships for the rest of their life. And yet somehow we've made that okay.
Oof.
Yeah, it's okay.
Such good information. Thank you so much for sharing all this. I know it was a lot of information. Maybe not everyone was here this whole time, but we'll post this replay on YouTube. I don't always post the full live, but there's so much information and knowledge in Mark's brain. And every time I talk to him, whether it's 1 or 2 or 3 hours, I always learn new things. And I love how practical and relatable and balanced the information is. So Mark, thank you so much for sharing all this. And
I just want to end with this one thing. Parents, be honest with yourselves before you go after your kids. If you want your kids to stop a lot of this behavior, stop it yourselves. Get real about how addicted you are to the behavior you want your kids to stop. And then your kids will actually have a fighting chance because you'll be talking to them as co-equals, not as a authoritative figure trying to force them to do a reality that they're not willing to do. And then finally, just in closing, back to you, Kim, and I just want everyone to know this. Every single person that has spent time with us tonight, I appreciate you so much. You guys are going to make it possible for us to change this narrative. It's not going to be me. I'm here just as a teacher. And Kim is really a teacher at this point. We need all of your help. And it's not to buy my book or to buy stuff with Kim. If you buy the book or donate, I'm fine with that. That's great. But you know what I would really like to see? It's just one of you tonight. Get really honest with yourselves and change yourself a little bit. And you might just find that you've just done the very best thing you could for your family. It starts with us. And Kim, I just wanted to make sure I made that point loud and clear. And guys, I am practicing what I'm preaching now because I love the kids, I love my family, and I love the United States.
Mark, thank you. I love that. Not much more can add to that. That's amazing. You guys, he just wrote a book. It's called Killer Tech and the Drive to Save Humanity. It's coming out in January. His website is markstross.com. This man's on radio every week. He does a lot of free information and education for the public. So if you want to learn more about not only technology and how to safeguard ourselves as humans and not be users and actually benefit from technology without being exploited by it, but also, and so importantly, how to protect children, how to actually safeguard children in today's digital world, please follow this man. Please check out his website. Please look at the resources he has. It's a lot of information. It's very applicable. So again, Mark, I can't thank you enough for being here tonight, for sharing your message. It's been such a pleasure. I know a lot of people really benefited from this information tonight. And again, you guys, I'm going to post the replay on YouTube so you can rewatch it. Thank you so much for being here. We will see you guys next time, and you guys have a great evening. Mark, thank you again, my friend. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you all.